Welcome to the Plant Cunning Podcast,
where we explore a relationship to plants, other people, and the mysteries of nature.
Coming to you from the high Allegheny Plateau in central New York.
We are your hosts, A.C. Stauble
and Isaac Hill. Welcome to another episode of the Plant Cunning Podcast. Today we have on Julian Barker, who is a noted herbalist. He teaches botany at the School of Herbal Medicine. He's a fellow of the Linnaean Society and is a really amazing person. He's recently written a new book called Physic, a Primer of Herbal Medicine, which is a fantastic, concise yet extremely informative introduction to really practicing herbal medicine. It's really helpful for anybody who wants to be a true herbalist and wants to see patients and practice this healing craft. There is a discount code available from the publisher, Aeon Books, which you can get from their website. There you can use this code, capital P, capital H, capital Y, capital S, 20 at Aeon Books. And that discount code is valid until June 30th. Before we get into the episode, I do want to also say that we are having the Plant Cunning Conference at our home in central New York, July 26th through 28th. We have some amazing speakers, including Pam Montgomery, Seven Song, Rebecca Byer, Lisa Fazio, astrologer Michael Bryan, so many amazing people, and as well as amazing musicians. My band, The Hills and the Rivers, is going to do a performance for the first time in a number of years, so you don't want to miss that either. You can get tickets for that at plantcunningconference.com. There's no www before it. I realized that at some point. No www, just plantcunningconference.com. So you can get your tickets there, check out the full list of speakers. There's camping, there's food as part of it. It's a 3-day conference, Friday afternoon through Sunday afternoon. So I hope to see you there. And without any further ado, here is Julian Barker. So today on the Plant Cunning Podcast, we have Julian Barker, who is an herbalist and an author and a very interesting fellow. How are you today, Julian?
I'm very well, thank you. The sun has come out.
Wonderful.
And it was pouring with rain this morning. You know I'm an Englishman because we always start by talking about the weather.
Yes.
Well, we like the weather too. It's a nice spring day here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gorgeous.
Yes, I can see the sun on your face.
So, Julian, we have a traditional first question on the Plant Cunning Podcast, and it is, how did you come to the plant path?
Oh, gosh. Oh, that's... We haven't got enough time for that.
I know, right? It's okay. You can go on. That's why we're here, you know?
This is my third profession.
Oh.
But in a way, you don't know that you're going to be a herbalist when you're 4 years old. But when you look back, you see, oh, that's what I was interested in.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I noticed. That's what my mother asked me to do and noticed that I was good at doing it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I didn't think, but by the age of 8, if you post-rationalize my history, you could see that I had the makings of a herbalist, even though I didn't even know the word at the time.
Julian, would you mind just tilting your camera over to frame your face centered just a little bit?
What do I do? Do I turn? Is that right?
Perfect.
Is that better?
Yes. Yeah.
And just a little bit more.
1 more inch. I should have asked you before we started, but we can edit this part out, so no worries.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I'm in my office. My consulting room is much nicer, but I pride myself on not having a computer in the consulting room.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. This room's great too.
So fountain pen is all I have there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And paper.
So what makes a good herbalist at age 8? What are the tendencies that you see looking back at yourself that you had?
Well, my mother used to drag me to see the aunts. Now I have to tell you, my grandmother was one of 14 and my grandfather was one of 9. So there were a lot of aunts.
Mm.
And she used to drag me around and say, don't worry, he'll just sit in a corner it struck me that for a 4-year-old to sit in the corner and listen to adults sort of indicates, I didn't think of it, that's all I knew then, but so I think that's the start of it, that one is actually an attentive listener, even though I didn't understand what the adults were saying.
Absolutely.
And then at age 9, I was always a book lover. I bought a botany book. I don't know why I bought a botany book. I liked its dryness and I liked its concision. And we didn't do botany in the 50s in Britain. Boys didn't study biology. That was for girls. That was we studied masculine subjects like chemistry and physics. So I was just attracted to it, you know. And so I wouldn't have known it at the time. And also, I used to go to Kew Gardens a lot and write down the Latin names of plants. I learnt Latin from an early age, 8. So my Latin was already quite good by 8 or 9. And so that was the makings of it, though I didn't know it at the time. Actually, my first profession, I was a drama teacher.
Okay.
And my second, I was a theatrical and literary agent. And then I became a herbalist, which I tried to find in North America because that's where they told me all the good plants came from. So I went over to your country and botanized in most of the states in the US.
Wow, that's fun.
So I know your flora quite well.
Very cool.
I would spend the winters in Mexico and Guatemala. Where I studied herbal medicine, yes.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
We're in New York, so.
Well, I used to love botanizing in the Catskill Mountains. Yeah, lovely. I love it up there.
Me too.
Yeah, us too.
And what are they called? The Finger Lakes? Have I got that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're in between the Finger Lakes and the Catskills, and the Adirondacks are to the north. We're in the very top of the Allegheny Plateau of the Appalachian Mountains.
It's a lovely state, New York.
It is.
And huge too, because it's a size.
It is. Right. Yeah.
Right.
There's so many different microclimates too, right in the state.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Yeah.
So what did learning herbal medicine and botanizing look like during those years? What were you doing? Were you studying with teachers or were you out just?
No, I was out with a hand lens and a flora or a field guide.
Yeah.
And just looking at all the plants. And so
the plants were your teacher.
Along the Blue Ridge Mountains, for instance. I mean, that was wonderful. That was wonderful. So all over. But I came back to Britain because in Mexico, I had the chance to start in herbal medicine. I thought, well, I've spent 35 years learning to be English. I'll have to relearn again. So I thought I'd go back to where at least I had the makings of a beginning. So I came back.
Right.
Oh, that's 45 years ago. Yeah.
So what do you think about the plants now? Do you still think that the American plants are better medicine or the
I didn't mean that. I just meant that they're fascinating in themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not instrumentally, just they're lovely.
Yes.
Yeah.
All plants are lovely.
It's true. Yeah.
Right.
You know, wherever you are, there'll be some lovely plants. Doesn't matter where you are.
Definitely.
Yeah. So what plants are popping up right now around you that you're excited to see?
Well, we've just got hawthorn going out of flower.
Oh, good. We're about to.
In my practice, which is a few miles away from where I live, it's surrounded by hawthorn hedges.
Wonderful.
And so it's my home as well. So it's one of the 5 foods for the aging heart is hawthorn. So that's wonderful. That just sort of sets you up for the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to see those blooms.
Yes.
Yeah. And so how did you go from botanizing to herbalism? Because they are kind of different. Like there's the plants themselves, and then there's the actual helping people with their problems.
I was botanizing because I wanted to be a herbalist. I'm sorry to make that clear. Yes. I wanted to learn the plants.
Okay.
And my advice to herbalists is always know the plants first.
Okay.
don't talk about a plant that you've read about in a book. That doesn't
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
So I've never used ginseng in my practice
Mm-hmm.
because I've never been to Korea. So, I mean, I can read the research literature like anyone else. But, you know, I only use plants that I've grown or seen in the wild.
Mm-hmm.
So I love using echinacea because I've seen it in damp hollows in South Dakota.
Yeah.
And that's why I use it. If I hadn't, I'm not sure if I would use it.
Yes. So having a relationship with the plant is really
Exactly so.
important before making somebody else having a relationship with it.
Well, primary knowledge is always better than secondary knowledge.
Right. Yeah.
You can't always get it, but here we can.
Mm-hmm.
But so there's the knowledge of the plants, but then there's also the knowledge of the human and the body systems and diseases. So how did you learn about that side of things?
I went to the School of Herbal Medicine and I did 4 years there and 2 years on another tutorial course. And I did John Christopher's course when I was in America, and I did a few. But you know, in the physiology is interesting and it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not. I mean, can I go back to plants themselves? I
Oh,
mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
of course.
Plants and soil and the fungal network between them is what maintains life on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the basis of human health is plant food. And then plant simples. You know, if you're a bit out of sorts, you might have chamomile.
Mm-hmm.
But if you introduce plants which aren't specifically food plants, which I suppose we would call culinary herbs, if you introduce those from a very young age, you actually induce a better ability to withstand the knocks of life. In other words, starting with culinary herbs, you become better. It promotes health. It reduces illness and it reduces disease. So that's so a very wide canvas. And the thing about plants is if you're using plants medicinally and not as pharmacological agents, they're very wide, they're very low intensity, they're very low power, high intensity. When I'm talking to my patients, a metaphor I often use, or a simile rather, is my watch here has a tiny battery and it's perfectly good, it does its job. Whereas the plug on my wall, I can put a kettle in and I can boil water. Now I cannot boil water with my watch, but my watch is not placebo electricity. It's perfectly effective what it's meant to be. And therefore one's using plants first of all as a constant perceptual, what's the word I want? I say it better in the book. I can't remember. You're giving a constant input, a sensory input. You're priming. That's the word I want. You're priming the person for that sensory experience, so that when they're a bit out of sorts, they get better quicker.
Oh, yeah.
And so you don't even need to go. But if someone becomes ill, they actually do become ill, or they have some transition they cannot manage, then you need to become the therapist. Now, the therapist has to be able to swing, flip-flop between two particular different views. One is wide, perceptual, empathic, accepting, receptive, and the other is narrow, analytic. And you need to flick. So the person has just said something, you think, what's the differential diagnosis? And you go through the physiology in your head. And then you flip back to the wide angle.
Yeah.
And so it's that's what makes the therapist, is the ability. Just being empathic is not enough. Just being analytic is not enough. You need to be able to flip-flop between the two modes as is needed. And that's it, really. That's all there is to say. I don't know why I wrote such a long book. If I could say it in 5 minutes.
This is the short book.
Right?
Yes,
This is your new book.
That's a new book, yes. The older book set it in greater length and greater detail. and probably a wider canvas.
Yeah. So Physic, a Primer of Herbal Medicine. This is the new book, and this is a slimmer volume. So why did you write this book, and why did you write the previous book?
Oh, it seems I'm incontinent. I can't stop myself trying to communicate. So, and when I finished that, I thought I really mustn't do this again, but I'm afraid I am brewing another one. So,
Are you really? Awesome.
yes, because I want to make it simpler and more succinct, you know.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
So is this itself a more simple and succinct version of the previous book that you wrote?
I suppose it is, although they're different in a way. They're sort of different in their character. The other book was a bit more ambitious, I suppose, a bit more philosophical, a bit more, I don't know. My first book was the medicinal flora of Britain and Northwestern Europe, because I wanted herbalists to have a field guide to the plants, you know.
So who is this, the Physic, a Primer of Herbal Medicine for? Is it mainly for herbalists?
It's for physicians, for herbal physicians.
Okay.
Physic just means nature, and became known as natural medicine, really.
So you talk about a lot of concepts in this book, and I think it's a really helpful book for anybody who wants to be an herbalist and wants to actually be healing people and working with clients. There's a lot of good frameworks in it. And some of the concepts that you talk about poise, talk about terrain, and I think we haven't really talked about terrain too much on this podcast. So what do you mean by terrain? What does terrain mean?
Let's talk about terrain first.
Okay.
Each one of us is unique, and yet each one of us is, is similar to a large extent. And the uniqueness has to do with the balance of endocrine and metabolic signals in the body. And it's imprinted between the 6th and the 13th week of our mother's pregnancy with us. Now, the 10th week, our fingerprints are formed. And so that's where the terrain, so it's not fixed. What it means is that the default position that one tends towards. So it's not deterministic, but it sort of narrows the window to what you can become and what you can do. And it kind of gives an idea of the signature of your adaptive response to the world. And of course, it does that via the autonomic nervous system, by the autocoid hormones, and by the pituitary hormones. Now, all of those medicinal plants nudge in one direction or the other. It's quite difficult to find a plant that doesn't. So that's it's just quite remarkable. Using plants as weak drugs, honestly, it's a bit hit and miss. And if you get it right, that's nice. If you don't get it right, what do you do then? Whereas what I do is I try to nudge the person's terrain back into a better state.
Yeah.
There's a fundamental circadian-based concept which I use, which is poise, which you've mentioned. Here's the idea. It's actually quite simple. That we all have the same amount of available energy, more or less. And if you take that as 1 unit or 10 units, units, of course, are immaterial. And you need, for you to be well and to feel well, you need to have 16 units of reserve energy. If that drops to 15, you'll start to feel unwell. It could be pain, it could be fatigue, it could be a headache, it could be just a bit weird. And the remedy for lack of poise is rest. It's as simple as that, is rest. Because rest is the precursor to sleep. Sleep is not the remedy, rest is the remedy. After which, sleep. But if you go through a transition that is more difficult, or if you get a disease, then rest is not enough and you need recovery. And that's where you need a herbalist and a good prescription, and you need proper attention to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you work all day, you're tired. Well, of course you're tired. You rest and you go to sleep, and that's it. You've maintained the poise between 10 and 16. It's if you override that feeling of the headache or the fatigue or whatever it might be, or the itch or the ache, if you override that constantly, you will start to become ill, and it will be more difficult to find your way back. And that's where you need, some therapeutic measures.
Right. So the terrain is like the whole system, the whole body system.
It's the individual system, yes.
Right. So
it's the monitor and the guide and the manager of the individual physiology.
And so then the poise is the balance of that whole system when it's in balance and operating correctly.
Poise is just a concept. It's an energetic concept.
Yeah.
Actually, if you have enough available energy, you'll be well. And if you haven't, you won't. It's as simple as that.
Okay.
And of course, the book goes into the details of how you might lose poise.
Mm-hmm.
And often it's overriding the circadian rhythm, or the circa-seasonal rhythm, or the annual rhythm, or what I call the heptade, which is, of course, every 7 years we go through a transition. And that's difficult. Transitions are difficult.
Yeah.
And
so
how
do you, that's what you tell people, how do you recommend like maintaining poise?
Culinary herbs. I've actually brought out the same month as I brought out Physic. I brought out, if I may show.
Yeah.
Does that show backwards? Eat well, feel
it works.
well.
Yes.
Is that reversed?
Just lift it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Eat well, feel well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Great.
It's basically about culinary herbs and food, and breakfasting like a king, lunching like a prince, and dining like a pauper. It's that simple, really. It's not complicated, but it requires you to find a rhythm that suits you. And because of your autonomic disposition of your terrain, and that's what we have, vagotonic people will need more time to digest and relax than alpha males, for example, who are much more rapid in their movement across the autonomic nervous system.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, if you're using like Ayurvedic terms, someone who's more kapha, they need more time to process. Someone who's more pitta, they don't.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And where does this, so you mentioned the endocrine system, and looking at your history online, it says that you've been involved in endobiogenic medicine for a while.
That's right. Yes. Which came to America, by the way, not with me, but Dr. Hediat in Chicago is one of the students of Dr. Jean-Claude Lapraz, as I was, and Dr. Durafour, who's no longer with us, who generated the idea of the neuroendocrine theory of terrain. I have to say, he didn't really invent it. Claude Bernard in the 19th century invented the term terrain. And he said, the germ is nothing, the terrain is everything.
Right.
He said that in 1859. And Durafour took on this idea, realizing that plants have got this polyvalent approach. They're very wide. They may be low in their intensity, but they're very wide in their approach, whereas drugs are the opposite. They're very high power, narrow focus, which you need sometimes, maybe. But the more you use culinary herbs and plant foods and eat well and live well, the less you'll need medicinal plants.
Right.
Yeah.
So from food to culinary herbs to plant simples like chamomile, if you're feeling a bit, you just want to digest well, to drug plants. There's a range, do you see? There's a sort of spectrum.
Right. So you want to make sure that the terrain is functioning well, and like the human body is functioning well and in balance, and the culinary herbs and eating a lot of plant foods, making sure you have enough rest, eating more in the morning than in the evening. These all help maintain the body. But when you get out of balance, that's when you need the more specific
Medicinal.
If the terrain is working well, the body will be working well.
Yeah.
And if the body isn't working well, you have to look, first of all, where is the terrain out of kilter? I mean, it does depend. There are some things we can't all. I'm a war baby, so all war babies have got very high cortisol.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, I can't do much about that.
Yeah.
It means that my cortisol response is very abrupt.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you were treating me, you'd need to know that.
Yeah.
So the history of the person, I usually start with the maternal grandmother, because the egg that made the person was made by the maternal grandmother. And, and then the mother's, first of all, where are you in the womb? For instance, the mother might have had miscarriages or previous children. Where are you in the family? And all of these things actually influence your terrain. So I attend to these things in great detail.
Mm.
And I don't ask people to tell their story. Their story tells itself by these details in a way, because it suddenly occurs to them, oh yes, my father's mother's aunt was, yes, such and such, and I think I'm a bit like her. And so the constellation of relationships tends to come out.
Yeah.
It's not a question of probing. I'm not a psychotherapist, but actually the psyche, does get some pretty remarkable revelations in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Well, I mean, would you not say that the psyche is part of the terrain?
The psyche is probably an emergent property of the terrain, as the mind is an emergent property of the brain. Certainly, of course. The notion that you could cut it off would be absurd. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, it certainly seems to affect the body and vice versa very, very intensely.
Yes. Well, there's the biology and there's the psychology, and then there's the physiology, and they all, you can't really separate them out. And what will be the point of trying to do so?
Right. So where do the endocrines, what's their place in all this complex system?
Well, hormones don't do anything. It's like a key doesn't do it. A key is just a lump of metal. But when you put it in a lock and turn it, then it has an effect. So the hormone, you have to think of the relationship between the hormone, the signals. There are lots of signals. So perceptual signals, daylight, touch, warmth, and so on. All the perceptual signals are received by the mind and the brain. And the brain has to respond, and it sends out hormone signals, and they have to find receptors. So you've got to upregulate, or you've got to balance the receptors to the hormones. So too much of a hormone and not enough receptors mean that it's washing around, creating havoc where it's not wanted.
Yeah.
Too many receptors means that you're hyperprimed. So, for instance, people who've taken too many stimulants in their teens, their receptors are hyperprimed, and they're calling out for more stimulants. So you've got to try to down-regulate that effect. And using another drug is not a good idea.
So you're saying Ritalin and Adderall are not necessarily a great idea to give our teenagers or children?
I would agree with you, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so the hormones are the signals.
They're part of the signaling pathways that operate, that allow us to be in the world.
And so what about the endocrine glands?
Well, the endocrine glands only produce the hormones. But they don't produce it unless they've got a stimulus to do it.
Right.
Yeah. There is a basic endogenous rhythm, and that's created by blue light at 4 o'clock in the morning, just before sunrise. So we're all balanced by the circadian rhythm and signals. But we've got to try and attune our signals to the world about us. But of course, accidents happen, things happen that you didn't, and so you've got to react to the unexpected.
Yeah.
So if you're well attuned to the expected, you're better placed to deal with the unexpected.
Right. Makes sense.
So that 4 a.m., the blue light there, could you say a little bit more about that? And
yes, I mean, it's quite novel. Well, 1990s is circadian physiology really developed and came into its own. That the hypothalamus, stimulates the pituitary, which stimulates the body to operate and be in the world. And then the eyes take in the blue light and the light of morning and feed it to the pineal gland, which converts the serotonin made there into melatonin, so that when it comes to sleep, we can keep sleep uninterrupted. So it's a highly complex system, which is why herbalists have to learn it very well, because you're using plants to modify it.
yeah.
So, and sometimes this morning I had a patient who's had cancer. And so one has to be very cautious in, not upregulating any prolactinogenic herbs or estrogenic herbs. You've got to be very cautious about that. And you want plants that are neutral from a reproductive hormonal point of view. And so if someone's had cancer, you need to be careful you don't anabolize, metabolism is always a balance between anabolism, building up, and catabolism. You need to get that balance right, because if they're anabolic, you don't know what they're building. Someone who's had cancer, so you need to. But if you're catabolic, there's too much material for cancer. So you need to be very cautious about the plants that you select,
right,
and their hormonal effects.
So if you have like blackout curtains in your house, are you not getting the benefits of the blue light in the morning? It's not hitting your eyeballs by having like an open window?
The thing is the human, we've got genes which actually which relate to whether we're in blackouts or not.
Okay.
I mean, the physiology is very interesting.
Yeah.
They put people in caves and found it takes about 3 weeks for them to free run out of the normal circadian rhythm. So it's very highly entrained in the human genome. Yeah.
And in Hinduism, for instance, the 4 a.m. time, that's like a great time to meditate. And like in Ayurveda, like you're supposed to wake up before the sun rise and these kind of things. But from your perspective and from circadian rhythm, and it seems to me that people have every single person has a different kind of rhythm of sleeping and waking. Is it better for everyone generally to wake up at sunrise, or is it differ for different people?
No, absolutely not. It's absolutely very individual. Depends when your birth time was, when you were born.
Yeah.
I was born at 9:15 in the evening, so I've got a chance when it comes to dawn.
I'm with you. Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. Night owls.
Yeah. So it makes owls. So there are sort of chronotypes. There are owls and larks.
Yeah.
And that's pretty entrenched from an early age. Yeah.
Validating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this book is primarily about, helping people to become good practitioners and helping to identify like what herbalists need to know to succeed. And there's a few things that you talk about in your introduction of like major areas that herbalists should study and be proficient in. So maybe can I just read those real quick?
Yes, of course, yes.
So contemporary physiology, an understanding of basic thermodynamics and the core of biochemical pathways, human embryology, especially implantation, gastrulation, and the events of the first trimester, as well as human development.
That's so important for understanding the terrain. I mean, it's fascinating. Apart from anything, it's fascinating.
Systems biology and plant physiology and ecology.
Yes.
So I think that really like covers it. And I was wondering if you wanted to talk about how you came to those and why those are the like 6 most important things for herbalists to really hone in on.
Well, you know, the 3 things that all humans need: love, work, and knowledge. And, you know, knowledge, I mean, if you're not interested in learning something new, I just think you must have a boring life. I just think it's, so it sounds like but it's, all of those subjects are fascinating. I'm not suggesting you become a master of it. You know, you need to be a bit of a polymath, I think, to be a herbalist. Because you're dealing with plants, you're dealing with people, you're dealing with their physiology. That's a lot to take on.
I love that you said that you don't have to be an expert, you know, in each of those fields. That takes off some pressure. But yeah, to be able to be proficient and learn and understand, like you said, we're working with all of these different systems and with these different plants.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Could you say a little bit? Oh, sorry. So what were you saying?
No, go on.
Well, I was wondering if you could elaborate more on the human embryology and how that relates to terrain and why that is so important.
Well, I suppose you could get gastrulation where you separate, where, I mean, the first 6 weeks of pregnancy are frankly a bit of an experiment, but you've really got to go up when you're at 6 weeks. And gastrulation is the division into the 3 germ layers. And you can't really understand tissues unless you understand that there are 3 different types of tissue. So the endoderm, the mesoderm, and the ectoderm. So, you know, if you're treating skin, you need to understand that. And also, the pituitary gland is part of the ectoderm. Isn't that interesting? It's part of the same germ layers as the skin. Now, I think that's good to know.
Yeah.
I think if you're using Vitex actus castus, you'd need to know that to try and understand its. People say it does this. Well, how can that possibly be? And you need to, I think, follow the tissue states and understand tissue states.
You think you could elaborate a little bit more on that for folks who might not, you know, catch what you're saying?
Well,
for Vitex.
Well, Vitex is the most extraordinary plant. I suppose it's the one plant I couldn't actually practice herbal medicine without. I would find it very difficult to practice herbal medicine without. I mean, there are a lot of plants that I give at the end of the book, my 42 plants that I'm not sure I could really practice without. But Vitex has got a very complex action, a very cyclical activity. Going back to embryology, I'm sorry if I'm chatting around a bit here, but
that's great.
What Delafour found was that the ratio between the 2 drivers of the ovary and the testicle of the gonads are 2 hormones, FSH and LH. And they're involved in 4 a.m. or between 4 and 8 a.m. actually, with the whole metabolic drive. And the ratio between FSH and LH is found in, it's easier to see in women because in menstruation, you've got the follicular phase where FSH is dominant and the luteal phase where LH is dominant. But those 2 hormones actually influence all of the tissues of the body, especially the colon. And so inflammatory disease of the bowel, you know, you need to take into account where FSH is going. Now back to Vitex. Vitex tends to reduce FSH and it tends to reduce metabolic estrogen. In other words, between the FSH signal and the estrogen response, it makes an equilibrium out of. It smooths out the peaks. And that's a remarkable thing to be able to do. And so a lot of inflammatory disease, you might say, well, inflammatory disease of the bowel, you need this and this and this. Yeah, but hold on. Before you get that far, what is driving this inflammation? And it's usually found in the pituitary, and of course it's modified by the microbiome, which is where obviously diet comes into it, and where my cookbook is, I hope, going to be useful. And the cookbook is not for specialists, it's for everyone. It's for parents, especially of children, because I want children to go to school with a cooked breakfast, which is not fried.
Not cereal.
It's suddenly gone dark. Is that, there's a cloud, you're... No?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
The camera can be weird.
So it's a cooked breakfast, not sugary cereal.
Yeah.
Oh yes, gosh, that's not breakfast. That's not that's a dreadful idea.
Yeah.
So the idea behind the book also is that you have this huge meal, which is very complex, full of plants, and 30 plants a week, of course. 30 food plants a week. But you don't freak out the parents. So it's cooking. It cooks itself while the parents are attending to the children, or you're getting yourself ready or whatever. And that's an important part of the terrain. You actually got to feed it properly.
Right.
When you start talking about herbal medicine.
So what do you
Sorry, and lots of culinary, lots of basil and parsley and cinnamon and turmeric and whatever,
Yeah.
and leeks.
I love leeks.
Yeah.
So what do you recommend for a good breakfast? What like, so you need plants? What about the starch to protein ratio? What do you think?
Well, that's what I go through in some detail. I give 7 breakfasts, 1 for each day. And so eggs make a big part, fish, some meat, but not processed meat, not any bacon, not any sausages and so on. Beans, of course, leeks I've mentioned, mushrooms, especially. And that way you get protein, carbohydrate, fat, and minerals and vitamins. What else do you need? Yeah.
True. Right.
We were lucky enough to find morels this week in our apple orchard.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
Sounds like good.
Yes,
good
very
part of
Yes,
yeah.
you live in a wonderful part of the world.
Yes.
So going back to Vitex,
I didn't really finish. I didn't really explain that properly, did I?
It's all right, but so a question for me is so you're saying Vitex, and like, I'm not an herbalist. I just like plants. She's more of the herbalist. But so Vitex, it's leveling the hormones. It's like reducing, and so is that the kind of herb that you would want to give some? And I'm not saying that we should be like, we can't prescribe herbs to people with cancer, here. But is that the kind of herb that you want to stay away from when if somebody has cancer, or the kind of herb that you would want to incorporate?
It works on. There are 4 channels really for the pituitary: the stress, the adrenal axis, the reproductive axis, testicles and ovaries, the thyroid axis providing energy for all the metabolic activity, and the growth hormone prolactin axis. Now, the prolactin is in mutual tonic inhibition with dopamine. So dopamine gives you the drive and the desire and so on. And prolactin organizes it. With too much organization, you don't do anything. Too much drive, and you don't organize your drive properly. So, and just getting that ratio right. So people are either got too much inhibition or not enough inhibition. And Vitex, you could just manage that very well. Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I wish we don't grow Vitex, but maybe we should see if we can.
We should, yeah.
We're kind of on the edge of being able to.
Your winters are a bit hard for Vitex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cold and damp. Too cold and wet for them.
Yeah. We can just about grow it in Kent and in the south where I am here, but needs protection in the frost.
Yeah.
It's a plant from Greece, really. It's from the it's from the Balkans.
Remember finding some very large, beautiful specimens in California when I was out there.
Oh, really?
I made a big harvest.
It'd be interesting to know, of course, whether the soil changes the plant. Whether the terroir, as the French call it.
Yeah.
The terroir.
Yeah. So
what is your opinion of that? Like, I know in Chinese medicine, they say, you know, like you should only use the herbs grown in their natural range. You know, so that's why like American ginseng from America, Chinese ginseng from China, you know.
Like all things, you can overdo the. I mean, as a general principle, it's quite. I mean, I use ginger.
Yeah.
I've never grown ginger, so it's one exception. But it's a cultigen, and I've seen it growing in greenhouses, and you know, and use it in a culinary way. So I use it quite a lot. It's just too interesting to not use because I don't happen to live in South India, where you know. So by and large, if I can use something that's local, I do. But I mean, I eat avocados. You know, they don't grow in southern England. There's no chance of growing in southern England.
Yeah.
Or even in New York State. So, you know, one has to kind of keep a sort of sense of... And the spice trade and the herb trade, I mean, it's thousands of years old. It's not as if we've suddenly discovered plants growing on the other side of the planet.
Right.
I mean, where would we be without cinnamon? And, you know.
Cinnamon.
Cinnamon and chocolate and coffee.
Yeah, come
Ginger.
on.
Yeah. Beautiful. It's true. So as far as talking about the practitioner and making the makings of a good practitioner, how does the relationship between the herbalists themselves and the patient affect the outcomes, their health outcomes?
Oh, I mean, the herbalist, the practitioner, there was a 1950s British psychotherapist who was also a doctor. We call them GPs, a general practitioner, who wrote a book called The Doctor, the Patient and the Illness. And he said, you know, the doctor is part of the medicine.
Yeah.
So there's no question that the therapeutic relationship. And of course, in our modern world, we do a lot of journeys, but we don't do many pilgrimages. And in a certain way, the therapeutic interaction is a pilgrimage towards health. That doesn't sound too pretentious, but I think it's what one's doing is opening a therapeutic space. And therapeutic spaces have been throughout human history. In Greece, they use theatres as social therapy. And we need to have a space for the therapeutic activity to take place.
Yeah.
It's not about applying a medicine to a person. First of all, so that, as you perhaps read, first the word, then the nurture, the convivial things of fresh air and exercise and diet, and only then the herb. So the herb comes third.
Right.
Not first.
And so this brings me to a question about the witness you talk about. So the practitioner being the witness, what is the witness in a therapeutic situation?
Very often, the point about empathy is that it's not sympathy. It's quite different from sympathy. You're actually imagining what it is like to be that person. And when that person witnesses themselves being witnessed, they move to their whole psyche moves to a different place, to a more receptive place, to a more a healing place. And the possibilities of the herb you're going to prescribe for them becomes much more effective. So you're priming, just as herbs prime the limbic system by their smell and their texture and the fact that you've had them every day for breakfast. And so the therapeutic witnessing primes you for the medicinal intervention. But the medicinal intervention comes third.
Yep.
After the witness and the nurture there's not much point unless if someone's not going to change their life, they're going to get what they used to get. If they want to get something new, they've got to change their life in terms of food, relationships, or exercise, or fresh air, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that in my own life, like the difference between walking into a doctor's office where they're looking at their computer screen, not making eye contact, asking the same questions the nurse practitioner asked you 5 minutes ago, versus somebody who's in the moment with you and looking you in the eye and just making you feel seen. Like that itself is the first step towards healing, and it's something that we kind of miss out on.
I'm afraid it's as simple as it is that. It's the quality. Herbalists say, how do I become a herbalist? They say, you will succeed by the quality of your attention.
Yeah.
And the dedication. You do your best after that. Mm-hmm. But you start with the quality of your attention.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no technique. There's no special algorithm. That's what it is. It's a human thing, and it's as old as humans. I'm not saying anything very original.
It's important, though. It's so important. So we have the witness, and then we have the nurture. So nurture comes before treatment. And what do you mean by the nurture exactly?
Okay, well, the Hippocratic corpus talked about the 6 non-naturals. By non-naturals, they mean the thing aren't part of you, the things you do. So fresh air, sleep, mm-hmm. exercise, getting your emotional life in order, and reducing your passions, and of course a diet in the nutritional sense. And I go through each one of those in the book, those 6. Of course, because the only 2 medicines really are digestion and sleep. I mean, the rest is extra.
Yeah.
They're the basis of healing. And helping someone sleep is not a question of hitting them with hypnotics. It's a question of actually managing their gut health. And that will manage their sleep. You do it that way round. Mm-hmm. So you can give people a liter of valerian, and it won't actually increase their sleep capacity and the quality of sleep.
And then only the herb. So that brings us to
then the herb.
Then the herb, yeah. So speaking of herbs, you mentioned that you have about 42 herbs that you wouldn't know what to do without in your practice. How did you come to those herbs? What was that process like of choosing these herbs to list in your Materia Medica section?
Well, when I graduated from the School of Herbal Medicine, the director kindly, because he made his own herbs, and he ran a business which is still in going today. He gave us 80 half liters to try, and we could choose, and we based on our training and so on. And bit by bit, with experience, you drop one, you drop the other, and you see the quality of the herb. It may be good when it's good, but it's the quality is like sawdust, so there's not much point using that. And bit by bit, you narrow and you narrow. My first year of practice, I only saw arthritis in the elderly and high blood pressure. Mm-hmm. So I had quite a narrow, and then it broadened out as I saw more people. So you start from a lot of herbs and not knowing what you're really doing to gradually understanding more what you're doing, and only using those herbs and also when you know the plant really well, you can make the connection between the plant and the person.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah, sometimes in like a consultation, person will be talking about something completely unrelated to plants, and then you just get this like lightning bolt of lemon balm like coming into your brain, and you like write that in the margins real quick of your notes.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes you rationalize, you think, well, she's vagotonic, she's a but, still, and you find a way of incorporating it in your rationalization. And
Yeah.
the intuition sort of trumps the rationalization somehow.
Yeah.
It's right.
I know. It's
Yes.
so
So
cool.
one has to keep testing oneself.
Yeah.
You know, have I done all that I should have done? Did I say all I should have said?
Mm-hmm.
Did I say things I shouldn't have said? Did I, use plants that maybe, I mean, the lady who came this morning, I've changed her prescription quite a bit because suddenly what wasn't obvious becomes obvious.
Hey.
And it just takes time. And it takes getting to know people.
Mm-hmm.
And, they need to make the investment and you need to make the investment in them.
Yeah.
And in your dispensary. So I've got more than 40 plants in my dispensary.
Right.
But
is there like a magic number? Like how many plants should you keep in your dispensary? Or
as many as I can afford.
yeah.
You find that there's a run on one plant or another, depending on the season, of course.
Yeah.
Because in the season, so the 4 midpoints of the year, which is February the 6th, May the 6th, August the 6th, and November the 6th, I alter the prescription anyway on a seasonal basis. Because they are the midpoint between the solstices and the equinoxes.
Mm-hmm.
And they're really the start of the seasons. The weather may not reflect it, but the length of day does. It's day length.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you have any, I guess my question is, do you have any major advice for people who want to step into the herbalist path? Like, what are the main important first steps? If you can look back at your own first steps or things that, you found helpful over the years, if you can condense any advice to the would-be herbalist.
Get to know the plants. That's number one.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And then find a course of study that suits you,
Mm-hmm.
that is rigorous in its physiology. I mean, we had rigorous anatomy, but, in the end, we don't treat anatomically. If you're giving a plant for arthritis, you're not seeking a particular joint, you're seeking the whole system. So physiology is so important.
Yes.
And you also need to know systems theory. You need to understand that everything is fractal in terms of season, person, but also the constellation of their relationships. Now, this is something that you only come to when you start in practice. And your question was about how do you start? But you've got to have an idea of where you're going, I think.
Yep. Yeah.
Yes. To find the path with heart, you've got to know that you're on a path with heart. And if you are, you're very blessed.
That's beautiful. That's very well said.
So when I changed, I was told that I could retire at 40. Quite a rich man, if I'd carried on in my profession. Well, 40 was when I started becoming a herbalist. And I'm very rich.
Yeah.
Not financially, but I have a very rich life.
Yeah.
So I'm very blessed. And so passing that on to anyone else, it's very important. And that kind of plant medicine, if you were in the wild, I'm not saying we should all be foragers and so on, but if you're in the wild and you come across someone who's hurt, you could help them.
Yeah.
Providing you witness their injury first. So they feel witnessed.
Yeah, I think the path of the herbalist is a very rich life and very blessed life. And I definitely feel lucky to be on the plant path. And we get to talk to amazing people like you on this show by being forever students and always wanting to learn more. And I'm very grateful that we have your book, and I'm looking forward to future books from you. So if folks want to get in touch with you or purchase your books and learn more, where do you recommend they go?
Well, the publisher, oh, by the way, I should have said, the publisher, I don't know, did they send you if anyone's listening to this, there's a discount code.
Yes.
Did they send that to you?
They did, and we'll put that in the intro, and in the
Great.
description.
Yeah. And also here in England, lots of students come by to my practice. I have a house which is just the consulting room, dispensary, and the office where I'm speaking from.
Awesome. So yeah, we'll put out the Aeon Books is the publisher. We'll put out their code in the comment section, or what is it called? In the event description. Yeah.
in the description.
Yeah. And this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom with us and stories. This has been really fun. Thanks, Julian.
It's been such a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.